I guess let's do the segment I have been calling the police state. Welcome to the police state, folks. I'm going to go over some stories about the protests, riots, and cop activity going around the world. I already touched on them a little bit. I talked about the Lebanon riots, but those are happening in a different context than the riots and protests that started with George Floyd. So, let's go through. These are just some of the stories. There's about 1 million stories about these protests you can find. The first is that activists have been targeting and removing statues, including Christopher Columbus, and King Leopold II in Belgium. There was also that photo of a old... There's probably video too, but I saw photos. The old politician in England who was involved in the slave trade in Bristol. They took down his statue and threw him into the ocean.
What do you want, Breton trash?
The King Leopold is in Belgium, and if you're not familiar with him, he basically orchestrated what could accurately be described as a genocide. He basically claimed the Congo as his own personal property. He sent down military people there, enslaved them, killed hundreds of thousands, if not realistically more than 1 million. In the millions. He killed in the millions of people.
I wasn't precise in my death estimates. Millions of Congolese people died. Modern estimates range from 1 million to 15 million deaths, with a consensus growing around 10 million.
In fact, I saw a really hilarious news story where it was like King Leopold II's second cousin, like his great grandnephew or some shit, came out and said, oh, King Leopold can't be blamed for all that stuff. He never even went to the Congo. He stayed in Belgium. How can he be blamed for that stuff? As if, Hitler very well may have never ever visited a concentration camp. Isn't that crazy? I mean, he probably did, but even if he never visited a concentration camp, it would still make absolutely no difference. So that's just stupid argument. But I only bring that up because the hilarious thing is how many of these inbred just decaying royalty who have absolutely no power anymore, how much they're coming out of the woodworks to poo-poo people about these protests. For example, in Louisville, Kentucky, they have a statue of Louis XVI there. I'm assuming because it's their namesake and no other reason. And the protesters cut off the hand of the statue, and then in freaking King Louis XVI, great grandson, came out of the woodworks and was like, hey, everybody, I'm sure you're gonna replace the hand, right? This is a very important statue. And it's like, who cares about your freaking dad? There was a revolution to get rid of him, and the world is better off without him, so who cares, dude?
When the revolution comes, you can bloody well be sure that your head's going to be first on the chopping block.
And then another thing about the Columbus statues is, as I'm recording this yesterday, although I record this podcast on Sundays, release it Wednesdays, so when you're hearing this, a few days ago, there were protests in Philadelphia, and later in the day, apparently a bunch of white Italian South Philadelphians all started guarding this Christopher Columbus statue. They were armed. They were trying to prevent protesters from destroying it. I mean, how pathetic is that? Here's the thing with Christopher Columbus and Italian Americans. I don't think Italians particularly care about Christopher Columbus. I mean, they might, but they have about 1 million historical figures they could revere and hold up as important. But Italian Americans need to deify Columbus. And here's the kind of ideological justification reasons that I can think of. Columbus is the proof, or Columbus is the evidence to them that Italians belong on the dominant side of American history. Because what makes someone a dominant person in American history? If they're a settler or descended from settlers. For example, I didn't get this growing up on the West Coast at all. But when I came to the East Coast, I was going to a master's program. I never graduated. I only went one semester. But a couple of my classmates said a really peculiar thing. They would brag about their connections to the settlers of America. There was one lady who was like, yeah, my last name is so-and-so, which means I'm in the same lineage of so-and-so who came on so-and-so ship. And almost as if that's like American royalties, like your proximity to the settler colonists give you a class status. So what Italian Americans need is for Columbus to retain his status as a prestigious settler colonist. And then they need to link the Italian Americans' existence to Columbus in order to be on the side of the settler colonists. If there's no Christopher Columbus, then Italians are just migrants. They're not settlers. They're less than settlers because they're merely migrants. Of course, the material reality, there is no material difference now. There is no more. We already live in a settler colonial society. You can't get any more settler colonial than the U.S. But Columbus is the mythological key for Italian Americans to be on the side of white people. Columbus was white. He settled America. We're Italians. We're white. We're just the same as the Pilgrims, the English, the German settlers. And Columbus is our proof. That is why reactionary Italians love Columbus so much. There's some more stories about the goings-on. Cops and Live PD, both. Well, Cops has been on way longer than Live PD. I've never even seen Live PD, but both fairly long-running shows that glorified police have both been canceled. That's probably a good sign. I remember watching Cops as a kid and even being like, this isn't cool. Like, these people are being exploited. Like, you find people in the worst circumstance. Like, why are we watching that? It just seems like a way to turn quote-unquote criminals into less than human. They're just a spectacle to look at. So I support Cops being taken off the air.
Bad boys, what you want, what you want, what you gonna do?
Another story is 7 Los Angeles officers have been removed from their field duties after using excessive force during protests. So, I mean, they're not fired, not charged with anything. It's only 7 police officers, but I do think some things are getting better. Of course, they're not nearly as better as they need to be, and I honestly think they will get a lot better after these protests. Like, for example, Cuomo came out the other day and he was like, referring to some BS laws that barely change anything. He's like, all right, protesters, the public's on your side. We gave you what you want. Time to stop protesting, okay? And it's like, dude, you have to know that when you say that, that just signals to people, we're desperate. Please stop. Please, we're begging. Please stop. We're desperate. And because of that, I do think there's going to be a lot bigger changes that happen. Because, frankly, I think they are desperate. And they will reach a point where they'll do anything to stop these protests.
Welcome to New York. It's been waiting for you.
Another story is Philadelphia police has suspended, and meanwhile, there's charges being pressed against a man named Joseph Balogna, Joey Balogna. That is his real name. And he is the most Philly cop you could imagine. He is just this. He's every stereotype you think of with cops. You know, bald, looks like a slab of ham. He probably takes steroids and doesn't work out. That's why he looks so like bulky and kind of buff, but also just like shaped like a barrel. It's just his neck just looks like a sausage is like wrapped around it. Just the most like nasty cop you can, just piggy ass cop you can imagine. Yeah, so he was thankfully suspended. He was also, a sheriff. He was I don't know, like a sergeant. He was some type of higher up. So if you've been to a protest, you'll see there's cops wearing all blue, and then there's like one guy wearing white. He's kind of in charge of the group, and that's what Joey Baloney was. And there are multiple videos that came out of him just using insane amounts of force. The most famous one is there was a group of people just kind of hanging out there. He completely just roid rage style charges at one of them, grabs him by the head, is just manhandling him. And this guy, he didn't even see it coming. He is doing nothing. And then a young girl comes up and tries to stop him from just doing like the most aggressive stuff. As soon as she does even a tiny bit of doing that, he refocuses on her, pulls out his club, and just clubs her over the head like hard. You can hear him clubbing her skull. It is scary. It's a scary video. He clubs her to the ground. And keep in mind, none of these people were doing anything. So just to give you an idea of how repulsive cops are, the police union in Philadelphia is selling shirts that say "Baloney Strong." They don't see a problem with beating the shit out of peaceful protesters. They see it as their job. And that's why they're allies with Baloney Strong. So where are the good cops here? Are they the ones wearing the Baloney Strong shirts? Are the good cops the ones who knocked over that old man in Buffalo, New York? Or were the good cops the ones who saw it happen and just ignored it? Or are the good cops the one who resigned in protest because people got punished for pushing down the old man? Are the good cops the ones wearing the Baloney Strong shirts? Maybe I already said that. Is Joey Baloney the good cop? There was also that video going around of the New York sergeant, whatever, having a hissy fit about how cops are so mistreated, man. They hate us now. Why does everyone hate us? I don't get it. Is that guy the good cop? Or was all the the cops around him whooping and cheering the good cops. Who are the good cops? That's what I want to know. I've never heard of one. Never even seen one. The regular cops you see out on the street, like they're one missed donut away from beating the crap out of a homeless person just for fun. Like, where are the good cops, man?
Oink, oink, pig. Can you sing a song?
I guess all the good cops are resigning after this, but only like 3 or 4 have resigned that I know of have resigned out of principles. A lot of them are resigning because they're like, this work is too hard. I don't want to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, beating people at protests. That sucks. And then there is also the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, where Seattle protesters have been gathering without police. Basically, so here's the storyline of how I understand it to happen. There was a guy who drove into the protests in Seattle, drove into people, tried to hit people. I think he hit some people lightly. People were like, what the hell are you doing? Going up to his car? What's wrong with you, dude? Who knows what they were saying. And then the guy takes out a gun, shoots one of the protesters, still brandishing the gun, gets out of his car, abandons it, and runs through the crowd. He ended up getting caught and stopped by protesters. And then he turned himself into the police. So pretty screwed up story, right?
This country is so screwed up, man.
Then news came out that the guy who did that, the guy who drove into the crowd and shot someone, was related to a guy who works at Seattle's East Precinct, which was like a block or two away from the protests. Then, the next day, the Seattle police take as much stuff as they can out of the East Precinct. They bring in shredders, and they leave the precinct boarded up, completely abandoned. Then protesters were thinking this was the pretext of some type of Reichstag fire, where the police were going to empty out the building, then catch it on fire to blame the protesters. So what the protesters did is they just stood around the police precinct all night to make sure that no one was going in to start fires. Because they knew if there was a fire, no matter who started it, it probably would have been police or someone affiliated with police, like the guy who drove into the crowd and shot people. They would be the ones who start the fires, and the protests would definitely be the ones to blame. So they started occupying the area around the police station. And then that grew a couple blocks in several directions and has become the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. It's also, they're saying they want to change the name to Capitol Hill Occupied Protest. Trump threatened to, quote, take back Seattle and said, quote, this is not a game, but the Seattle mayor and Seattle police have been a little bit more dodgy about it. They're not so sure. So we'll see what happens with that.
Democrats decided to shield and shelter criminal. Look, wait. You have criminals.
There's also another autonomous zone that popped up in Philadelphia called the Philadelphia Autonomous Zone. It's built along the Benjamin Franklin Parkway, which leads to the Art Museum. It's really close to the Barnes and Rodin Museum. If you're familiar with that area, it's built in like a park. That one's much smaller, and it's more like a park occupy rather than the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone occupies like streets, not like a park. I mean, it does occupy part of a park, but so there may be several autonomous zones popping up. I don't know. I've only heard of those two. And the Philadelphia one is not nearly as pressworthy as the CHAZ, so we'll see what happens. I'm going to go to the state of the state, where I'm going to talk about the history of law enforcement, but I do want to give my thoughts on the CHAZ at this point. There's been a lot of people online criticizing it from the left, criticizing it from the right, obviously, defending it from the left. Then there's been, anarchists criticizing Marxists for criticizing the CHAZ. It's all just really messy, but here are my thoughts on it. For one, as a protest, it's totally cool as a protest. Like, that, it is a protest, and they are occupying that area as a protest. That is why I kind of think the name Capitol Hill Occupied Protest is better than Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, because they really don't have the size, resources, material to make a truly autonomous zone. I mean, in the most basic sense, okay, they're still relying on American plumbing, they're still relying on electricity, blah, blah, blah. You could go into all the pedantic little things like that. But I think that's kind of missing the point, because they're not a revolutionary movement. They're not setting up a true, state society. So people who are reading it that way are kind of missing the point. Of course, there's not going to be a revolution that stems from the CHAZ, because it's not trying to be that. So I could criticize it for not being properly revolutionary. Like, if they wanted to be revolutionary, they'd need a lot more armed protection. They would basically need to conscript everyone occupying it to have a chance of fighting against the police. But that's not happening. That's not even something that historically can happen right now. The U.S. isn't ready for a revolution. There's no infrastructure for a revolution. So, as a protesting strategy, I think the CHAZ is totally cool. And just because it's not going to bring about a revolution doesn't mean that... I mean, think about all of the potential future protests. They'll have things like the CHAZ and Occupy as a blueprint for what they end up doing, and they can scale it, size it up, make it bigger, do whatever. And for all those reasons, I really can't criticize the CHAZ. I know there's been, cringy stories about people live there saying this or that on social media, but, who cares? That's the spectacle element of it. That's the type of stuff that people who want to criticize it will latch on to, and they won't hear anything else about it. But the people who do care about the CHAZ will hear the useful stuff. They will learn from it. They'll know what to do in the future. And they will carry that knowledge into the future. So just because conservatives and contrarians aren't getting anything out of the CHAZ doesn't mean that other people aren't, and it could be used in useful ways. So I stay optimistic.